Welcome to Becoming Limitless. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to optimize their brain and their body with biohacking. I'm going to teach you how to eliminate brain fog and upgrade your health so you can have more productivity, energy, and growth in your business. I'm your host, Tanessa Shears. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you? How's your day going? I'm going to be talking about something that I know everyone wants to know. It's how the heck do I get a full night of consolidated sleeps and wake up feeling fully energized without an alarm clock? This is one of the number one things that my clients come to me for. They say, it takes me forever to fall asleep. I wake up a bunch of times during the night. I just don't feel rested when I wake up. I feel groggy. I have to hit the alarm a bunch of times. And this is something that I am going to help you with today on the podcast. I am so excited, but I want to tell you a little bit about how I got into understanding sleep as a major component of our health, our productivity, and our well-being that helps us really show up to our business. So when I got pregnant, I was like, you know what? I am going to be the fittest pregnant lady, and I'm going to make sure I hold myself accountable and take a certain number of steps per day. So I went out and got myself a Fitbit as kind of like a reward to myself to stay motivated with my fitness and to, stay encouraged with what I was doing so that I didn't use pregnancy for me as a reason to slack off, because I've always worked out and I wanted to have a healthy pregnancy and carry that through. So I got my Fitbit. And the purpose of it was, like I said, just to tell me my steps. So I wore my Fitbit for the first couple days and the first weeks, and I learned something from my Fitbit that completely shook my world. I had always thought that I was a good sleeper, and I always understood, you know what, I do get enough sleep. I go to sleep at, 10:30 or 11 at night, and I wake up at 6:30 or 7 in the morning. Like, I get 8 hours sleep. That's kind of how that works, right? I never thought anything of it because I closed my eyes and woke up again 8 hours later. And I always thought that that meant that I was getting enough sleep. But what I learned after analyzing the Fitbit data, and for those of you guys that don't have a Fitbit, when you wake up in the morning, it gives you a graph that's called a hypnogram. What you can learn from this graph is exactly what time you fell asleep, how many times you were awake during the night, how long each wake up was, what time you woke up, and then you also get to see how much time your brain spent in light sleep, in deep sleep, and dreaming. So I all of a sudden had all of this information about how I was sleeping, and I was like, what do you mean I'm only getting 6 hours and 45 minutes of sleep? No. I go to sleep at 10:30. I wake up at 6:30 or 7. How am I not getting 8 hours of sleep? And what I didn't know at the time that I've come to learn is that while you are sleeping during the night, your brain naturally wakes up, sometimes randomly, sometimes at the end of a sleep cycle. Sometimes we get woken up by noises, or we get a little too warm, or we get a little too cold, but we wake up during the night. Now, most of these go unnoticed, so we feel like we had a consolidated night's sleep. Some of us, on the other hand, we know we wake up during the night, but what I was shocked to see is that even though I thought I was getting 8 hours of sleep per night, I was actually only getting 6 hours and 45 minutes or 7 hours because I was tossing and turning. And I had so many of these little red spikes on my Fitbit graph that were like, you woke up, you woke up, you woke up. And what I started to realize was like, oh my gosh, I might not be getting as much sleep as I thought I was. So this started me on the journey of really looking into sleep and how it affects us. And I mean, nothing made that more obvious than when I had my daughter. And it was an exaggerated look into how intensely sleep actually affects us. Because right from the night that we had her, I was laboring all night until about 3 nights later, my Fitbit logged a total of 6 to 8 hours total across 3 nights. And I mean, the week following, if you have children or you know somebody that has children, you know that those are nights where you're not getting enough sleep. The maximum block of sleep I would get would be 3 to 4 hours. And I know this is an exaggerated experience from what most of us experience of wake-ups in the night, but it made it so crystal clear to me about how drastically sleep can affect our ability to be clear and focused and productive. I mean, I would show up at my desk and I'd be like, I have no brain power because, I started seeing clients again 2 weeks after my daughter was born. I love what I do. I love my clients. It wasn't work to me. It was part of feeling like me and who I was again. But I definitely noticed that my brain wasn't as sharp. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm feeling this on this exaggerated level, I bet my clients are all feeling this on a bit more of a moderate level. And this is just not a way that's conducive to a successful business. So I made a plan that as soon as I got my daughter's sleep under control, which we did, we went through some coursework to teach us how to enhance her ability to help herself fall asleep. Mine was up next. And that's when I started learning the power of biohacking specifically and what it could do for my sleep. So if you listen to the last episode, you'll know that biohacking is really just hacking our own biology. It's using solutions to enhance our health and our well-being and our longevity. And it's meant to be done in a way that you can measure the effects so you can tell what works and what doesn't. So a really good example is my Fitbit, recording how I slept during the night. I'm able to look at the data and make changes based on what I learned. So that's kind of the sum of biohacking if you didn't catch the last episode. But what I ended up doing was when I learned how to biohack my sleep and get a full night of sleep and start waking up without an alarm clock, I naturally started waking up at the same time each day. And I'm going to teach you today on the podcast how I was able to create 2 extra hours every morning where I was able to wake up, be fully charged, energized, and hit my desk and have 2 hours of focused productivity every single morning, even while raising a newborn. And if you're not raising a newborn, then you were one step ahead of where I was. But in that time where I had those 2 hours and I had been successfully biohacking my sleep for several months and improving my numbers and improving my scores, I actually wrote my very first book. It's called Focus: Hack Your Sleep for More Productivity, Energy, and Growth in Your Business. And I published it on Amazon, all while having a baby under 6 months old. So when I say that you can have maximum productivity when you optimize your sleep, even if you're dealing with circumstances out of your control, it is totally doable, and that is why sleep needs to matter to you. Sleep is like one of our greatest opportunities to enhance our intelligence and, to become smarter and better at our job. It's the 20% of what we're doing that is going to be giving us 80% of our results. I find honestly that my sleep single-handedly can dictate the focus and productivity I have the next day. So I really don't want you to overlook it. And if we remember on the last episode, we talked about the pyramid of things that we're going to be covering on the podcast, and the foundation of that pyramid being the things we need to work on first: sleep, nutrition, and sleep, nutrition, and exercise are the ones at the bottom. And the great thing about sleep is we can all do it, and it's free. You don't need to go buy anything. You don't need to go anywhere. You do it anyways. So why not do it better? Because when I talk to my entrepreneurial clients, we sacrifice sleep at the expense of our brain and how it functions because we think it's helping us out. We think that, staying up till 12, 1 or 2, or, being on our phones and engaged with our businesses right up until the time we go to sleep is a hustly way of, growing our businesses. But the fascinating thing that we don't consider is what that practice is taking away from our work productivity the next day. Like those 2 hours that we actually end up staying up. Well, what happens if we'd have gotten that time back in productivity the next day had we had a proper sleep, and our work would have been of higher quality output, right? So sleep it's such a beautiful thing. Like I really want to sell you on sleep because it has changed my business and the productivity that I experience every single day, the energy that I feel, the thing that gives me the ability to be an entrepreneur, running my business, seeing tons of clients every week, staying engaged on social, writing newsletters, recording podcasts, writing books, at the same time as being a wife, maintaining my home, and being a mom. Like I have room for that because I have developed the capacity because of sleep. And I'm going to go over just a couple of the things that's going to make you an amazing entrepreneur. And I go over this in detail in my book, Focus, but sleep helps you sustain concentration and focus. Sleep helps you be more productive and have blocks of deep work where you enter flow easier and you stay there longer so that you can get more work done in the same amount of time because your brain is working faster. Having adequate sleep improves your capacity for willpower and enhances your emotional intelligence. And we're going to be going over all kinds of stuff like this on the next podcast. But just to, I really want to emphasize, like, it makes your memory sharper, it makes you think faster and be more creative with your solutions, and it allows you to read other people's facial expressions better and to manage your overwhelm. And that aside of everything it does for your physical health. So this is why I'm starting this whole Becoming Limitless podcast with sleep, because it's that important. And I know how easy it is going to feel to skip this episode and tell yourself, I already know this. No, you don't get it. I sleep well. I go to sleep at 11. I wake up at 7. I get great sleep. But I'm going to tell you this. I went and got my certification as a certified sleep science coach, which really led me down the road. And it wasn't until I decided to take a vested interest in my sleep that I paid any attention, because there was an influencer that I followed online for a long time. Her name is Chalene Johnson. And it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And she was really explaining to her audience that she was seeking treatment for her chronic ongoing sleep deprivation. She was waking up super early to do workouts. She was staying up late, and she was going to a really famous sleep clinic in the States called the Amen Clinic and getting her brain scanned. And she was reporting that the amount of sleep deprivation she was experiencing was the equivalent of long-term drug and alcohol abuse on her brain. And I remember seeing it, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't wake up that early or go to sleep that late. So I would skip her stories on Instagram and I would bypass those posts. So I know how it can feel to think that this doesn't apply. But I want you to consider this. Until you truly feel what it feels like to wake up in the morning without needing an alarm clock at the same time, to wake up energized, to wake up in a good mood, to feel fully ready to take on your day, until you know what that feels like to be well rested on a continual basis, I just think that this is something that you need to pay attention to, because once you feel like that, I can promise you are never going to want to go back. So what we need to jump into talking about now is the stuff you need to know to tell if you're getting a good enough sleep. So there is a difference between the sleep opportunity you get and the time you spend asleep. So if you go to bed at 11 and you wake up at 7, that is an 8-hour sleep opportunity. So what that means is you gave your brain 8 hours to rest, 8 hours of opportunity. Now, that's often different from sleep time. When we look at sleep time, you have to take into account the total amount of time you spent awake per night. So if you take the actual minutes and hours that you spent asleep and you divide it by the time you gave yourself to sleep, so that's sleep time divided by sleep opportunity, it's going to give you a percent of how much of your time you tried to sleep you actually were asleep, and that number is called your sleep efficiency. Now, ideally, we want to look at only spending 1 to 5% of our night awake. But most clients that I see when I analyze their data from their sleep trackers is that they are often awake closer to 40 to 60 minutes. So this really starts to impact the efficiency of your sleep. So they're spending that 40 to 60 minutes each night awake. So if you even look at a basic goal of, achieving 8 hours of sleep per night and you're awake for 40 to 60 minutes, that means you're spending anywhere from 8 to 12.5% of your night awake. Now, ideally, we want to have a sleep efficiency. You want to be spending at least 90, even upwards of 95% of your time awake. So we can see that most people are barely even scraping into the 85-90% range. And this is the purpose of being able to actually quantify your sleep. See, these measuring devices like, Fitbits and Oura rings and the Garmin watches and all the different type of trackers out there, they include things in this time awake, such as the time it takes you to fall asleep, which is called your sleep latency, and the amount of time you lay in bed in the morning, and all of those things. So if we are looking at an actual 8-hour night of sleep, not sleep opportunity, If we want to hit that ideal awake time of 1 to 5%, that is going to mean that in an 8-hour time of sleep, you're not spending more than 24 minutes awake. And like I said, it's totally natural to wake up at the end of your sleep cycle. So a great goal to set, especially if you're finding that you're one of those people that are awake 40 to 60 minutes a night, just like most of the clients that I see. I even have some clients that are awake as much as an hour and a half per night or an hour and 40 minutes per night because of tossing and turning and just poor sleep hygiene. So a great goal to start at is if you're in that range to aim for 10% of your night awake. Think of small, manageable goals. And we need to ensure that you're actually getting enough time. So when I look at my Fitbit over time, I'm pretty consistent at 7 hours and 40 minutes of time spent asleep, getting enough dream sleep and enough deep sleep each night. The amount of actual sleep each person needs is unique to the individual. So there's no such rule as everyone needs 8 hours a night. Some people will need 9 hours a night. Some people will need 7 hours a night. Some people will need 7.5 hours a night. And the only way you can find that is by making these changes and find out what your body naturally relies on for adequate rest. So like I said, I fall at about 7 hours and 40 minutes of sleep. But when I look at my Fitbit, I am awake on average 35 to 45 minutes per night. That's just due to the fact that I'm still going through a lot of postpartum hormones. There's lots of things going on right now that are causing me to wake up in the middle of the night. So I am by no means perfect, but I am always working on getting those numbers down. And I do outline, exactly how I improved it and what my numbers did as I added in great sleep habits and change like that in my book Focus. But I did start out as almost an hour awake per night, and I have gotten that down to an average of 35 to 45 minutes, which I'm really proud of because it makes a really big difference. So I know that if I am awake for 45 minutes each night and I need my 7 hours and 40 minutes of sleep, I need to give myself at least 8.5 hours of sleep opportunity in order to meet my goals. Because if I'm just giving myself 7.5 hours to meet my 7.5 hour goal, I know that I'm awake enough that I'm not going to be hitting my goal. So I need to be making proactive changes. So that's the first thing you need to do, is making sure you're getting enough sleep opportunity to give you the time of sleep that you actually need. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is the easiest way to improve your sleep. This is the actionable stuff today, and it's about accessing and harnessing the power of your circadian rhythm. Have you heard of that before? The circadian rhythm? If you haven't, perhaps you've heard of someone being an early bird or a late night owl. So what we're talking about here is how your body functions relative to a 24-hour clock. Circadian basically means around the day, around the clock, right? So there are so many things to do with our physical bodies that follow the clock. Our body temperatures follow the clock. We get rises and falls at predictable times every single day. Our hormones change. We get certain pulses of hormones early in the morning and certain ones late at night. Our moods, our metabolism, and of course, our sleep all functions relative to that 24-hour clock. It's why we tend to get tired at night and we aren't as much in the morning. So if we are able to optimize how our body performs relative to the 24-hour clock, we can feel so much more energized. And we are going to do that by a circadian rhythm reset. So what is going to have us feeling good is having a consistent sleep and wake time. Why? Because not only does it ensure you get enough sleep, but it ensures you get enough quality sleep. And we're going into that on the next podcast. And it is one of my favorite things to talk about that very few people actually pay attention to, that makes the biggest difference in your productivity and your focus. So the other reason we really like to optimize our circadian rhythm is because it optimizes how our body experiences our hormones. So, for example, you might have heard of the hormone melatonin. It is the hormone that signals to the body that, hey, it's time to sleep, we're getting ready, we're dialing down. That actually begins rising 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. Another hormone you might have heard of is cortisol. So that's known as our stress hormone, but it actually has a really important function. It helps us wake up in the morning, and it starts rising and peaking around 6 a.m. So ultimately, if we can time our sleep with these hormones and have everything functioning in an optimal way, then we will feel much better because you are naturally sleeping when you're tired, and the hormone cortisol helps wake you up in the morning. It's about working with your hormones. And this is how we no longer need an alarm clock, because you're naturally waking up when cortisol is picking up your energy. So, like I said, the trick that I'm going to be teaching you is called a circadian rhythm reset. What this is going to mean is you are going to go to sleep and wake up at the same time consistently for a minimum of 3 weeks. And I know this may sound hard, and I know this may sound like, well, what about social activities? And you're right. It is challenging, and this is not something that, obviously we're expecting to do for the rest of our lives, but it really does help with the weekday mornings when we're wanting to get up and get excited and started about our day and energized. So here's where I recommend to start. Start with your mornings. So look at your week. What time do you want to be waking up at every single day? Is it 7 a.m.? Is it 6 a.m.? Is it 5 a.m.? What time does your day need to start at? That is the first time you're going to set. You are going to go to sleep and you are going to wake up at that same time every single day, even on the weekends. Yes, on the weekends, because when we allow ourselves to alter our sleep rhythm and sleep later on the weekends, what happens is it disrupts how our body functions with its hormones on sleep and how we feel when we wake up, and it makes the week so much harder. So I want you to start with just your mornings. Then what you can do is adjust the evenings after. So if you are chronically sticking to 6 a.m. wake-ups, what is going to happen over that first week is you are naturally going to start getting tired at about 16 hours after you go to sleep. That's called our recycle rate. The recycle rate of a human is approximately 16 hours. So if you're waking up at 6, you're naturally going to start getting tired close to 10. So what that'll do is it just naturally helps you start going to bed earlier on the times that's going to give you enough sleep. So if you're a real overachiever, you can just go right for it, pick your start time and your end time and go with that. But if you want to ease into it, there is nothing wrong with starting in the morning and then after a week or so, adding in a consistent bedtime. It's also important to know that everyone's sleep and wake time is going to be a bit different. It's about 50% determined by genetics. So the fact that, you stay up late and wake up late, that's largely genetically determined. Early birds are largely genetically early birds. Although you can manipulate it a little bit, we are generally drawn to the times we are genetically programmed for. So I have to tell you, this circadian rhythm reset was the thing that made hands down the biggest difference in my sleep and how I felt the next day. I was easily able to wake up at the same time every single day without an alarm clock. So what used to start as me going to bed around 10:30 and waking up at 7, I started finding that I was waking up without an alarm clock, and then naturally what was happening is I found that my rhythm started adjusting. So what we do now is I find my body just naturally starts falling asleep around 9 p.m. and I am awake, feet on the floor, fully energized by 5:30 a.m. at the latest without needing an alarm clock. And I got to tell you, waking up without an alarm clock is such a privilege, and it is so wonderful because you are not interrupting your sleep cycle. When you interrupt a sleep cycle and you wake up in the middle of either deep sleep or a dream, it can take up to 30 minutes to get rid of the grogginess you feel first thing in the morning. So when your body naturally wakes up, your body is smart. It wakes up at the end of a sleep cycle, so you're not feeling so flustered and frazzled all morning. So I really encourage you to try doing the reset, circadian rhythm resets. And the other thing that I was thinking of is when we were trying to do this, especially when I was trying to set a consistent bedtime of, 9 and 9:30, is when I started looking at what was actually keeping me up at the end of the night, it was never anything productive. For me, it was always I was scrolling Instagram, or I was checking emails, or we were watching another 3 episodes of Modern Family. Like, that was what was keeping me up. And so when I started asking myself, like, well, what do I want my focus to be like tomorrow morning? I need to make that decision when you're choosing to stay up and watch Netflix past your bedtime. I mean, is Netflix going to be more important than feeling amazing tomorrow and like I slayed in my productivity, right? And one last thing that I really want to note is that this is not the expectation that you go to bed at 9 and wake up at 5 on the dot without change every single night. What it is it is a guideline that you are committed to honoring most days of the week. So if I set a bedtime of 9, I'm usually asleep plus or minus 20 to 30 minutes. So sometimes I'm sleeping at 8:40, sometimes I'm sleeping at 9:30, but I try to keep it within that window. But the neat thing is my wake up windows are relatively consistent. Even though I like to wake up at 5:30, sometimes it's 5:40 and sometimes it's 5. And it's really about when my body decides it's fully rested and has gotten enough quality sleep to allow me to function during the day. And I always like to think like the power of sleep is so fascinating. If I could create through my sleep 30% more energy every single day and be 30% more productive than I usually am. And if I could enjoy my life and extend my career 30% longer, what could I get done? What could I achieve? What could I accomplish with my life that, I had previously been giving up to an extra episode of Netflix or to, staying up for things that just didn't move my life forward. So that's the question I'm going to ask. So your actionable step for this week is to start your circadian rhythm reset. What time are you going to commit to waking up at every single day, weekends included, plus or minus 20 minutes, for 3 weeks? I really want you to try it because then what you'll start noticing is, I feel amazing when I wake up, and it's going to be really hard to go back. So I hope this has been really helpful in helping you not only harness the power of your circadian rhythm, but on understanding how to get a full night of 7 to 8 hours actually asleep and to start waking up fully energized every single day without an alarm clock. It is not for people who are just early birds or for people who have no kids and full control of their life. It can be for you too. You just have to decide to take action on the circadian reset and put it into play today. So if you loved this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast because you'll be in the know for each episode that I release to you because I don't want you to miss a single one. I've been so happy to have you here. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will see you next time. Bye. Ready to begin each day feeling energized and focused? I'd love to work with you one-on-one. In my Becoming Limitless program, you're going to learn how to optimize your brain and body with science and biohacking so you can be highly productive and grow your business faster. Join me over at TanessaShears.com/work with me. I'll see you there.